Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Child Anxiety Fact Podcast. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I'm the owner of Child Anxiety Support, a membership for parents of anxious kids. I have my master's in clinical counseling and additional postgraduate training in child anxiety disorders, including exposure and response prevention and the Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions program, or SPACE program, which was designed by Dr. Ellie Lebowitz of the Yale Child Study Center. I'm also certified in infant-toddler mental health. FACT stands for Frequently Asked Questions, and each week I'll be answering your questions about childhood and teen anxiety. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the Child Anxiety Fact Podcast. I have been on an unplanned hiatus this summer because we moved and then my website broke, and this is a labor of love for me. I don't have a marketing team. I don't have anybody helping me. And so when it comes down to it, my priorities are always with my clinical clients and the site members. And so they're my priority, and other things kind of get put on the back burner. So between the move and then having to fix my entire website and some public speaking I've been doing this summer, the podcast, well, it got a bit neglected, and I apologize for that. I'm committed to keeping it going, and sometimes reality just runs up against my best intentions. But in any case, we're back now, and this week's question is, what does successful child anxiety treatment look like? Now, this is a question that I actually made up. It's based on different versions I've heard from people who come to me to ask me about my program or to talk about the child anxiety treatment they've taken on for their kids in other venues, like seeing a therapist or whatever. And when they're talking to me sooner or later, if they have tried other things, they say to me, but that didn't work. Whatever we did, it didn't work. And so first, I want to talk a bit about expectations, because I think the expectations get in the way of successful treatment. And I think this after talking to people about my program, but also from being a therapist myself and working with parents who say, but this isn't working, and realizing I didn't do a very good job of explaining what working means, what it looks like. So let's talk about those expectations. Lots of parents talk to me, say, my child went through counseling and it didn't work, and how I know it didn't work is that their child is still anxious. But anxiety isn't something you can just cure like a rash. Treatment isn't like a course of antibiotics. It's never going to clear up like that. That's because anxious brains are shaped to be anxious, and anxiety isn't necessarily just going to go away. It's part of us, and it's an important part of us. Anxiety does lots of good things. It makes us look both ways before we cross the street. It makes us make sure our nice work outfit is clean the night before a big job interview. We need anxiety. Some of us are just more sensitive to anxiety than others, and that's fine as long as we're the ones still running the show. The problems start when our anxiety gets out of control. That can look like seeing danger everywhere, even when there is no danger. It can look like having such strong somatic symptoms like a stomachache or headache that we feel incapacitated. And sometimes that can be feeling frozen because our standards for performance are too high, so we don't do anything at all. Sometimes unmanaged anxiety can result in depression as we become increasingly discouraged or get down on ourselves for not being able to do the things that we want to do. Managed anxiety looks like seeing danger and being able to say to ourselves, wait a second, is that actual danger or does it just feel dangerous? Managed anxiety means managing the somatic symptoms, recognizing them as anxiety and knowing how to calm those symptoms down, how to take care of our stomach aches or headaches or shaky legs or sweating and all those things that can come along with anxiety. It can look like recognizing our perfectionism and knowing that it's anxiety and knowing how to realistically lower our standards. And it can also look like being kind to ourselves when we're feeling sad or incapable or discouraged, so that we're able to muddle through anyway. okay, now you're clear that managing anxiety doesn't look like not having anxiety, right? It means managing the anxiety that we have. So, what does successful treatment do? Well, successful treatment is going to give us or our child three things. It's going to give us an understanding of our anxious experience, understanding how it feels in our body, where it shows up, and how it tries to trick us. So we'll understand how it can warp our point of view and how we interpret things. It's going to give us coping tools that work for us. We'll need to try different things at different times. And that will help us with the inevitable dread that goes along with anxiety, of the fear of the stress response, and for taking care of ourselves after we have faced the anxious thing when we might feel more fragile or might feel a little more down on ourselves. That's just kind of the anxious fallout, the anxious hangover. And it's going to give us a sense of ourselves as successful, as people who are able to face our anxiety and get through it rather than avoid it. Successful treatment is going to help your child understand their anxiety. It's going to give them coping tools so they can manage the big feelings, and it's going to help them feel like people who can handle their anxiety. What treatment is not necessarily going to do is it's not going to make us less anxious. Our children are not necessarily going to come out of therapy or a psychoeducation program or a support group and feel less anxious. I mean, they might. And that's especially true for specific phobias or fears. You can overcome a fear of dogs or bridges or public speaking. Absolutely. Yes, 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 you can do this. But if we have specific phobias or fears, we might be more prone to other worries too. And again, that's part of our makeup. Being an anxious person, we may not be able to cure that, but maybe we don't need to cure that. Maybe we just need to learn how to cope with it. Child anxiety is trickier to treat than adult anxiety for a few reasons. The first is that there's the developmental component. We need to shape our education and intervention to the child's age. And very importantly, we will need to revisit the learning as they grow older. Kids need to learn things over and over and over again because they are changing and their understanding of the world changes too. Knowing how to manage sad feelings when you're 3 or 5 is very different than knowing how to manage the sad feelings that come with our first breakup or a major disappointment, like not getting into our number one school, right? So, emotional regulation, identifying emotions, that's ongoing for all of us. It's ongoing for us as adults too. We learn that over and over and over again. And the other reason that anxiety is harder to treat in kids is attached to that, which is that they need someone to teach that to them over and over and over again. And the ideal person to do that is, of course, you, their parents. The way that we teach our children how to manage their anxiety is both direct in talking to them, sharing the information, sharing what we observe about their coping, learning about the technicalities of anxiety and anxious cognitions so that we can pass that on to them, and also indirect by setting an example for them, using the tools ourselves, recognizing our own cognitive distortions and facing our own anxiety, particularly our worries about their worry. That's what I think is so great about working with parents is we can take their worries about their child's worry and work through that. And in that, the parents get this great example of how to do it. As they work through their worries about their child's worry, they go, oh, okay, now I see how to work through my child's worry about the dark and going to bed alone and going to school and raising their hand in class because I know what it's like to feel worried. I'm working through my worry. I can offer this to them too. And of course, we teach our children not to avoid by not helping them avoid, which is at the heart of the child anxiety support program. Successful treatment does not mean our kids won't struggle or that we won't struggle with them. Successful treatment is going to mean that you both know more or less how to do it. We know how to help them with their struggle. They are learning how to help themselves with their struggle too. My goals for people who go through my program is that parents will be realistic with themselves and their kids about what anti-anxiety work looks like including understanding there's no cure, that parents learn what's unique about their child. They understand that child's particular challenges and can shape their support to fit that child. And also, I think unconditional acceptance of who their child is, even as they encourage and gently push their child into growing, and that parents understand what the goals are. They know how to walk themselves through the problem solving of child anxiety, because that's really what I'm teaching them, is how to do that problem solving, because eventually they're not going to be in the program. And they need to know how to do it when anxiety inevitably comes up again. And my goal is that the parents are, of course, able to pass those skills, identifying the avoidance, making the plan, celebrating progress, on to their child, so that when the child is grown up and wants to avoid, that child is able to take themselves in hand and push through and cope. That is successful anxiety treatment. There are still going to be sleepless nights and new challenges. There's going to be setbacks, there's going to be frustrations, and that's okay. Life is like that. It's a journey. I mean, think of it this way. Think of something you know how to do that's not easy. Maybe it's satisfying, maybe you enjoy it, but it's not easy, whether that's running or knitting or gardening. Even if you're great at those things, sometimes it's hard. It's just built into the doing of the thing that sometimes it's hard. Anxiety life is like that too. Sometimes it's just hard, but that doesn't mean you failed. You have to go back, perhaps, and revisit those tools you've learned and relearn them and reapply them and continue to practice them. I guess I'd say the only time counseling or a program like mine doesn't work is if it failed to teach you or to teach your child all of this coping, all of this understanding, all of this planning. And I'd say that if that's the case, it's time to try another therapist or another program, because there are lots of resources out there, and it's important that you find the one that makes sense to you so that you can make sense of it for you and your child. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you have a question you would like me to answer on the show, please go to childanxietysupport.com/FAQ. And if you'd like to learn more about the Child Anxiety Support membership, please go to childanxietysupport.com. The membership offers courses, live events, and community to help you design a personalized program to free your family from the trap of child anxiety. I hope you'll consider subscribing to the podcast and sharing it with any friends or family who you think might find it helpful. You can get more of my child anxiety content over at Instagram, where I'm Dawn Friedman, MSED, or on Facebook at the Child Anxiety Support page. Thanks again, and have a great week.